It was a historic day where one of the most interesting advancements in the history of human civilization occurred. This is what happened on this date in 1969.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
That happened on this day 53 years ago. I don't think there's any doubt that that is one of the most impressive achievements in the history of human civilization. The landing on the moon stands out. I think that's something that people are going to be talking about 100 years from now, 200 years from now, 300 years from now, as something that marked a new era in not only space travel, but in human advancement. And it makes me wonder, John F. Kennedy was very vocal when he went on and said, we choose to go to the moon. And he set a goal for the government of, before this decade is out, and he said this in 1961, we should have the goal of sending a man to the moon and returning him safely back to Earth. And it almost seemed like science fiction at the time. And I'm wondering, frequently that term moonshot gets used now and again. If we were to decide as a society, as a government, as a people, to do something else, what do you think would equal that? What do you think would be similar in this day and age to the moon landing in terms of an accomplishment for the American people or for human civilization? It doesn't have to be uniquely American. It could be international cooperation as well. What do you think? I remember when the Obama administration was in power, Vice President Biden at the time was very vocal on the issue of cancer. And he wanted a moonshot for cancer. Isn't it interesting you don't hear anything about that anymore? I remember that was a big thing when he was vice president, because obviously his son had passed away from cancer. A moonshot for cancer, moonshot for cancer. And I think that's laudable. I mean, do you think if we took the full resources of the United States government and focused every policy-making avenue of the United States government on finding a cure for cancer, that we'd have the same success as the moon landing? And if we did, would that be as big an accomplishment for human civilization as the moon landing was? If not, what do you think would be? Would going to Mars be a similar achievement in terms of human development? And it doesn't have to be space related, but would colonizing Mars or the moon be a similar advancement? What do you think would be a 21st century equivalent to the moon landing? What could, if President Biden or whoever the next president is, President Trump or President DeSantis or President Harris or whoever, if the next president wanted to do something Kennedy-esque in terms of setting a goal that seems impossible to reach and then get there, what would it be? I'm just curious. I've been thinking about that all day. 800-848-9222. I did also want to mention this. This is an article in space.com. Big thank you to John Katsimatidis for sending me this article. In early June, NASA announced that it's commissioning an independent study on unidentified aerial phenomenon, UAP, as UFOs have recently been rebranded. The intent is to move the scientific understanding of UAP forward. That's the word from Thomas Zurbuchen, the NASA's Associate Administrator for Science. Quote, NASA believes that the tools of scientific discovery are powerful and apply here also. We have access to a broad range of observations of Earth from space, and that is the lifeblood of scientific inquiry. We have the tools and team who can help us improve our understanding of the unknown. That's the very definition of what science is. That's what we do. So this UAP study team, again, at NASA, will be led by astrophysicist David Spergel, previously the chair of the astrophysics department at Princeton. And Spergel said, given the paucity of observations, Our first task is simply to gather the most robust set of data that we can. We will be identifying what data from civilians, government, nonprofits, companies exists, what else we should try to collect, and how best to analyze it. So I do wonder, people are already asking in the scientific community and in the UFO community, will this move the needle at all? Is this something NASA's new UFO or UAP study, is this something that is going to move the needle at all on the UAP/UFO issue? What do you think? So I'd love to know, what's a modern day moonshot, number one, and number two, what do you make of this new NASA study, and will this have any impact whatsoever on moving the needle forward? 800-848-9222. You can comment on anything else that we've covered this show as well. 800-848-9222. Let me begin with Devin in Yonkers. Hello, Devin. Devin?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I got you now, Devin.
Hi, thanks. I just wanted to say to the transgender person that you interviewed, my heart breaks for him. That's really terrible, especially when he said, gay men will not want him, straight men will not want him, so he's lived alone. I'm a lesbian, and, I'm a bit of a controversial one. I'm Republican.
How dare you?
And I personally, and I do not say this with any cruelty at all, but I personally feel that, sex changes, transgenderism really is actually something that needs to be dealt with psychologists and psychiatrists. I mean, the interview that you had really kind of proves that. I mean, that person is extremely brave and courageous, and I just wanted to say my heart goes out to him, and sending lots of love and prayers.
Thank you, Devin. That's very nice. I completely echo many of your sentiments. 800-848-9222. Menachem is in Lakewood, New Jersey. Hello, Menachem.
How are you doing? Amazing show, and I think that the fellow you had him before was absolutely brilliant. Maybe that's what loneliness does, a clarity of vision that was fantastic. I just wanted to bring out a few points. He mentioned something that I thought was pretty interesting, that if not for the generational problems, that this wouldn't be as popular, which I think
that was a really interesting answer. You're right about that. I noticed that too.
That was a very unique point, and I want to just break it down, which it goes a lot what you're saying about the cancer, because if we focused all the government facility, all our capabilities and try to cure cancer, would we be able to? Of course we'd be able to. Why are we not doing that? And I think this goes hand in hand with the transgender, that you break it down to three points. There is a popularity. There are some people, I think, that have some reason why they wanted to be trans, and that could be broken down with psychologists, psychiatrists, and some of it would be, I think, a sexual attraction, to some extent. Then it gets the politicians always jump on whenever there's a minority. They always jump on and say, "Oh, wow, this is an opportunity to keep us in power." So this happened with the civil rights movement, which was a true movement, which was a great movement, and then right away the Democrats used that, and they used every immigrant and every small minority to say, okay, we have no policies that make sense, so let us tell a population or part of our population that you are oppressed, which there can be a lot of truth to that, and then we'll continue to stir the hatred, and then we will buy millions of voters. And when that started to not be enough or not suffice, and so of course they saw trans as being a trans, gay, lesbian, all these people, and then they continued to tell them how the other side hates your guts, and then you can never vote, and stir anger. And if you want to know why there are mass shootings, this may be the reason why there are mass shootings in this country. Could stir anger and then power themselves off of that anger. And then, of course, so there's this triangle. And then the third part of the triangle is, of course, that like every industry, the only way it's fueled and it's perpetuated is with billion-dollar industries. So you have the people, the idea that comes from the people who make the idea up because it suits their heart's desires. Politicians that see this as a great idea, and then the industry, which sees, wow, this is a great idea, we can make billions of dollars. This goes with racism, transgender, and everything else, I think.
Well, it is interesting, Menachem, and I have to confess, it's not something that I considered before today, but, who would have thought that, right? The point that he raises, I think, is an interesting one. you have a generation of young people that is, by their own admission, more non-binary and more transgender than anybody. It's also a generation that has produced a lot of mass murderers in terms of these people carrying out these mass shootings, particularly at schools, but at other places. They're on drugs at higher levels than previous young people. They're committing suicide at higher levels than previous young people. They are suffering from obesity at higher levels than previous young people. They are suffering from depression and anxiety problems at higher levels than previous young people, and they're killing themselves at higher levels than previous young people. Almost every, I don't, the jury's still out, I guess, on whether transgender is positive or negative, but I don't think it's an indication of a healthy view of yourself. I'll say that. So almost every metric of how young people are doing today as compared to a generation, 2 generations ago, with the exception of teen pregnancy, that's the only thing that's not up. Everything else is up among young people. And it does feel that maybe you have this generation that feels kind of disillusioned and disrespected. And maybe they're looking for answers in all sorts of places, whether that's drugs, whether that's gender reassignment surgery, and whether that's addiction to computer games. I don't know, but it's an interesting question, and it's one that I'd like to explore more in the future, maybe with a whole panel of folks that are kind of expert in this, a psychologist, maybe some youth people, maybe an actual young person. Wouldn't that be something? So we'll get into that. 800-848-9222. I would love to hear your thoughts on a modern-day moonshot and where that would lead us. The other space thing that I did want to mention is private investment in the space sector dropped in the second quarter of 2022. So this drop indicates that the space industry is not immune to the economic issues plaguing other industries as a possible recession looms. So there's a new report from Space Capital, and that shows that 92 companies received a total of $6.1 billion, with a B, dollars of investment in the second quarter of this year. That figure represents a drop from the first quarter of the year, which saw $7.2 billion invested across the space sector. So with $13.8 billion raised so far, this year is expected to come in far below the nearly $47 billion in funding secured during 2021's record-breaking year for investment. So Chad Anderson is the managing partner of Space Capital. This is what he wrote in his report.